Democrats are up in arms over a Treasury Department report showing tax refunds this year are down about 9% over last year, and they're blaming President Trump's Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. California Senator Kamala Harris tweeted, "The average tax refund is down about $170 compared to last year. Let's call the president's tax cut what it is, a middle-class tax hike to line the pockets of already wealthy corporations and the 1%. But tax expert Dan Pilla says Democrat lawmakers and some taxpayers are looking at it all wrong. He says receiving a smaller refund is actually a good thing, because that refund is only what you overpaid in taxes and is no indication of whether your tax liability went up or down. Pilla also says that the whole controversy shows that the average person has no idea what they pay in taxes, and he says that's the problem with the system. Many taxes are hidden, and people don't know what their tax burden actually is. Heather Sell, CBN News.
Thanks, Heather. And tax expert Dan Pilla is joining us here. It's always a pleasure to have him. Dan, good to see you again.
It's good to see you, Pat. Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm getting close.
You're getting close.
Let me ask you, what is the deal on this tax refund? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, first of all, it's never a good thing to get a tax refund because it means you overpaid.
Yeah.
All right. The typical taxpayer overpays by about $3,000 a year. That means you're paying about $275 a month in and month out, in taxes you don't owe. Right? And you have to wait a full year, actually more than a year, 14, 15 months before you get your money back. And then they don't give you any interest. So it's the world's worst way to save money.
Why do people do that?
Well, they do that primarily out of ignorance. They don't know how to fill out the withholding form, the W-4 form, to report to their employer the correct number of allowances that they want to claim. And so they think they have to overpay their taxes because they think this withholding is just automatic, and it's not. You have the right to adjust the withholding to match your tax liability, and people just don't know how to do that. The National Taxpayer Advocate has reported to Congress that the vast majority of American people have no idea how to work their way through that W-4 instruction form because it's so confusing. And this is part of the problem with the tax law. And they do it on purpose, Pat, because they want the money. They want the money.
Well, what about the whole idea you fill out a postcard and send it in?
And that's a farce, too. Listen, the tax form was redesigned. All they did is they took 79 questions or 79 lines off of the Form 1040, and they spread those 79 lines over 6 additional attachments to the tax return. So the Form 1040 is shorter now. It's only 12 or 14 lines, but all the rest of those 65 lines or so are spread over 6 more forms. So it's a complete farce. It's a total farce.
What about this deal about those states like California and New York that have such high taxes and they don't get a deduction on their state taxes beyond a certain percentage?
Well, what happened is they capped the deduction for state and local taxes at $10,000.
Yeah.
All right. And so these states that have high taxes, New York, California, a couple of the other states out there, Connecticut and so forth, New Jersey, they're all complaining that now their citizens have to pay higher federal taxes because they can't get a full deduction for their state income taxes. My advice to the high tax states, cut your tax burdens, lower your taxes for your citizens. Don't whine about the cap on the deduction. Lower your tax burdens for the citizens of your states. That's why people are leaving those high tax states.
Well, they really are, aren't they?
They're leaving those high tax states.
What are the low tax? Do you have any clients that you recommend that they go to Florida?
I've got a lot of clients that have, of course, I have clients all around the country, and so we got them everywhere. But yeah, the fact of the matter is that there's all kinds of people that are leaving the high tax jurisdictions that are going to lower tax states. But here's the thing about the setup piece that I want to talk about. They talked about early on the tax refunds being down. But Pat, when they did that analysis, that was over a month ago when they did that, there was fewer than 20 million tax returns that were filed. All right, and so it was a very small sample size. Now they redid the analysis just the other day. I got most recent numbers with me right now, based on over 50 million tax returns that were filed. So almost a third of the returns are in now. The tax refunds are up. The average tax refund is higher now than it was last year. So these people that are claiming that the lower tax refunds prove that it's that the Jobs Act was tax cuts for the rich, it's complete nonsense. It's a total fraud. The fact of the matter is 80% of the people out there are going to see a tax cut, and now we're seeing that manifest in higher refunds, not lower refunds, higher refunds than last year, as more of the tax returns roll in during the tax season.
The actual tax burden, the Democrats say will only help the top 1%. It's a tax cut for the rich, et cetera. Talk about that.
Oh, it's just a complete farce.
It is.
Pat. It's just absolute. Listen, the Democrats, the leftist Democrats, continue to pound on this idea that every tax reform is nothing but tax cuts for the rich, and it's simply nonsense. The fact of the matter is the top 1% of income earners pay about 13% of all of the taxes paid. The top 5% of income earners pay over 60% of the tax burden. There is no such thing as rich people not paying taxes. It's just complete nonsense.
Well, you hear Bernie Sanders saying, well, let's make the tax code fair and let's make the rich pay their, quote, fair share. What is that?
Well, there's no definition of fair share, Pat. That's the problem. There's no definition of it. And now Bernie Sanders is proposing a wealth tax, right? Not an income tax. Not a tax based on what you earn. He wants a second assessment on top of the income tax based on the assets that you've accumulated. It's like an estate tax, Pat, only you're not dead yet. These people don't even want to wait until you're dead before they steal your money.
Well, that's unconstitutional, isn't it?
It's immoral and it's unconstitutional. And it's just out. Listen, there's no other way to describe that kind of tax. It's outright, unadulterated, unmitigated theft. That's what it is.
Well, what do you think? The Democrats have gone so far to the left on their proposals. It's just insane. I mean, Medicare for all, tuition for all, et cetera.
They're falling all over themselves to create more giveaway programs to entice people to vote for something for nothing. That's what it's all about. It's all about how can we buy votes for the leftist Democrats as fast as we possibly can. Now, here's the thing that's troubling about Bernie Sanders and his wealth tax.
All right.
According to a Politico poll, 60% of the people that were polled, Pat, are in favor of this thing, as long as it's pointed at quote-unquote rich people. Here's what the problem is. The leftist Democrats think that anybody who's making $100,000 a year or more is rich. That's what the definition is. Listen, Pat, that's, when you got a husband and wife, you got 2 or 3 kids in the family, $100,000 a year is not that much money.
It's not, yeah.
It's not that much money.
What is the average income these days?
The median income right now is about $54,000, plus or minus.
Well, that's not really enough to live very well on.
No, it's not, especially if you consider that you got a family. If you got a one income earner, and we're talking about $55,000 a year, roughly, a kid or two, 2 or 3 kids, that's not a lot of money. If you got a husband and wife that are out there in the workforce, now we multiply that times 2 basically. So you've got, there's your $110,000 a year. You're a rich family. Yeah, that's rich by their definition. And they just want to steal more of your money because they think that somehow you're taking advantage of the system because you're out there working hard and trying to make a living.
You remember Obama? You didn't build that. You didn't make that.
No, we did that. The government did that for you.
Government did.
Yeah, the government did that for you. You didn't do that by yourself.
Did you see that statistic I mentioned earlier that we have more millionaires in America than there are people living in Sweden? Have you checked that? Is that a true statement?
I did see that. Yep. And that's astonishing. And you know what? God bless these people. Listen, here's the thing, Pat. If you make the money honestly, if you don't steal it from somebody, if you earn the money peacefully, then you have a right to use and enjoy that money. You don't owe it to the government, and you certainly don't owe it necessarily to somebody who didn't earn it. Now, you've got a biblical responsibility and a moral responsibility to voluntarily give back, tithe to churches and organizations that are going to use that money to help people that are downtrodden and so forth. We all understand those biblical principles, but those principles are based on conscience, and those principles are based on voluntary action, not the force of government. When you've got the government that's got a gun to your head, that's not charity, Pat, that's theft.
How come the majority of people, these young people, particularly think socialism is a good thing? Socialism is horrible.
Well, because they're ignorant.
They're ignorant.
Listen, it's as simple as this. Our schools are turning out high school kids that are ignorant of civics. I'll give you some numbers from the National Report Card. Of course, you know this is the organization that looks at what the educational levels are in our high schools, and we've got numbers that show that fewer than 40% of the high school graduates, now we're talking about high school seniors, are proficient in reading. Fewer than 35% are proficient in writing. Fewer than 25% are proficient in civics, and this is the number that I remember vividly, is 12% are proficient in U.S. history. So we got generations of kids, Pat, that can't read and write, that don't know how their government works, and know nothing about U.S. history. And so when you take all of that and you add all that together, what you get are socialists, because these are the people who think that somehow government is going to do them a favor, that somehow government can give them something for nothing. It's ignorance talking, Pat. That's all it is.
Well, that's a shocking indictment on our educational system, isn't it?
It's what we call the failed academy, for sure.
Well, you know, they've had that modern math and that modern teaching and so forth that just is absurd. The people aren't being taught they can't read and write. They're functionally illiterate by the time they get through the third grade.
Yeah.
But you're saying it's a generation of socialists, of ignorant socialists that's being...
That's what it is. I mean, listen, the more ignorant people are of history, the more they tend to believe that socialism is a good thing. The more educated people are when it comes to history, the more they realize that socialism is not only a failed system, Pat, it's a diabolical system that is responsible for the murder of hundreds of millions of people across the world. It is not. And listen, we don't have any better example in front of our face right now than what's going on in Venezuela.
Absolutely.
And yet people look at that. I don't even think they look at it, Pat. The thing is, they don't even look at it. And yet there it is, right there, a glaring example of what's going on.
I would like to launch the Dan Pillar for President Society if you ever decide to run. Very articulate. Thank you, Dan. God bless you.
God
Appreciate it.